There has been an absurd amount of talk over the last few months about the assistants on our phones, in particular on the Google side of things, the assistant changing into Gemini for a lot of us, and how do things work? Is it truly smarter? We're missing some features from Assistant. Again, lots of conversation about that, but lost in this is a report from, let's see, this was December, so late last year. And I'm going to tie this in with some more recent news, so don't worry. Let me just remind you of at least this bit of context. Report from December the 14th. Google is working on Pixie, which is an AI assistant for the Pixel 9. And there's other things about glasses with object recognition, which we actually saw sort of probably faked maybe, but a demo of something like that at Google I/O. But what is this Pixie assistant, right? We already had Gemini coming, and Gemini is here. So is that the same thing as Pixie? Is it different? It is different from Pixie. So let's scroll down, and we have some information here from The Information, strangely enough. They have a quote, an AI assistant called Pixie that will be exclusive to Pixel devices that will use Gmail, Maps, and other data from Google products on your phone to evolve into a far more personalized version of Google Assistant. What does that mean? Well, they went on to say that it can perform, quote, complex and multimodal tasks, such as suggesting directions to the closest store where someone can buy a product they have photographed. So that is pretty interesting. You take a picture of a product and say, hey, phone, where can I get this? It recognizes what it is, and then it tells you where you can go find this. Now, look, I understand one possible bit of confusion here is that Gemini, which has, again, rolled out, can kind of do things like this already. So how is this different from Google Gemini? And I think that it is different in that it's going to be more tightly integrated with the operating system. Now, this is a little bit of speculation on my part, but I think this is something Google has experimented with in the past, and I think that they're finally going to really go for it to some degree with Pixie. What if this is the sort of thing where you can finally really start controlling your device with your voice commands? We can already open applications and things like this, but what if you can say, open up the Walmart app and find this particular product, and it opens it up and finds the product? Again, this is speculation, but that will be very, very cool to see that sort of thing. And apparently, it's going to be built on the large language model work Google has already done. We have this quote here from the Pixel team saying that the broader family of Gemini models will unlock new capabilities for the assistant with Bard experience early next year on Pixel. And of course, that has happened. It has continued to happen. I think that it will continue to happen. And I think that on these Pixel devices, I don't know if it's going to be called Pixie at the end because it's really confusing, Pixel Pixie, but I think that that's what we're going to be seeing. It's going to be sort of an advanced version of Gemini, perhaps Gemini Nano, perhaps this runs on device locally. That would be really, really cool. But a more advanced version of Gemini with a special name that has a deeper OS integration and can do more of these intense multimodal tasks. Now, why am I talking about all this? Because we now have to pivot to a current news story that involves Apple. Now, the original report is on Bloomberg. It's behind a paywall, so we're going to be reading from Engadget. Apple is reportedly overhauling Siri with AI for improved voice controls. Now, this comes hot on the heels of the report that Apple has apparently, to some degree, settled on OpenAI for its AI sorts of integrations. There was talk that they were actually in negotiation with Google. Apparently, they've signed some sort of a deal with OpenAI to, again, build their AI stuff in the next version of iOS, the next iPhones, to build on the back of. There may still be some Google stuff in there as well. Those negotiations are apparently still ongoing, but they're apparently going with OpenAI to some degree. And let's scroll down, and we'll kind of get into the meat of this article. Apple is working on a version of its Siri voice assistant that will use advanced AI powered by large language models, Bloomberg has reported. The technology will allow users to perform specific app functions with their voices, such as opening documents, sending emails, and more. To me, this sounds similar to what Google is trying to launch with Pixie, which should be, at least at the start, exclusive to Pixel devices. Now, keep in mind, though, that is based off of a little bit of my own sort of trying to read the tea leaves, okay? So what we've heard specifically mentioned by the articles in question, Bloomberg and the information, is that what Google's doing sounds like it could also just be sort of a more advanced version of what Gemini is already doing. Maybe this system-specific, application type thing I was kind of alluding to, maybe that's not going to be a thing. Maybe that's just me kind of chasing something down the wrong path. On the flip side, what Apple is rumored, if you just read the words, is sort of the opposite. So maybe you can think about it like this. Is it possible that I'm just wrong about that, and what Google's doing is sort of an AI assistant that reaches outward, and what Apple's doing is an AI assistant that reaches inward? It's more concerned with things on your device, documents, emails, opening, triaging your applications. So that's another way to potentially look at this. It's entirely possible. They say this new version of Siri will only work with Apple's own apps to start with, but of course they'll be able to roll this out, compatibility with their apps. Kind of reminds me of Dynamic Island, right? Something similar to that. Maybe I'm just not keeping up with things. Have apps actually adopted Dynamic Island? I remember in the beginning there was a lot of complaints that just not many apps used it. Maybe some of you iPhone users in the comments can let me know. Have people actually adopted it? Maybe that'll kind of tell us how adoption will be for this, if it's going to be a similar process. They go on to say the assistant will be able to analyze your phone's activity and automatically enable Siri-controlled features. This kind of reminds me of the shortcut key on the side. It's just hooked in a similar way. It'll support hundreds of commands, but will only be able to process one at a time at first. Later, Siri will support multiple tasks in a single request. That's interesting. Sending or deleting emails, opening specific sites in Apple News, emailing a web link, or asking for an article summary. So this is, again, kind of what I was saying, more turned inward, doing things on your device. I mean, you could say sending an email obviously reaches out beyond your device, but hopefully you know what I mean. One is more akin to search, maybe you could say, whereas this is more akin to just using your phone. They do say here, once multiple commands are enabled, it'll be able to summarize or record a meeting and then text it to a colleague all in one request. That is actually really, really cool. And that sounds very similar to what we just read about Pixie, being able to look at an image, tell what it is, then go find a listing. We're talking kind of multimodal at that point. To kind of put a lid on this, they say it's unclear which LLM Apple will use to power this version of Siri, but of course, I just mentioned they've got to deal with ChatGPT at the same time. They may also be talking to Google to integrate Gemini into its search function on these iPhones, so we don't really know which way this is going to go. This may be something that we hear talked about at WWDC 2024. That might be a little bit soon for this kind of thing. Maybe they'll just tease it. Maybe they'll just announce the ChatGPT, the OpenAI partnership. Hard to say, but I think this stuff is going to happen quicker than people may realize, because I would assume that Google's been kind of building the hooks for this for a while, and they've just been waiting on the correct LLM to come along, the correct deal to be able to actually power it. So hopefully, again, this can kind of come together relatively quickly. At the end of the day, I think this stuff is really, really interesting. We may be on the cusp of an iPhone and a Pixel, the Pixel 9, having some very, very impressive assistant features that we have never seen before. Which one do you, based on the limited information, do you think sounds more interesting? Which of my two possible interpretations sound more plausible to you? Are these going to end up overlapping quite a bit, or is Google going to go more towards search, which makes sense, and Apple's going to go more towards just focusing on their device, which makes sense as well? Sound off in the comments down below. I will drop links to this Engadget article, as well as the older article from 9 to 5 Google, in case you want to check those out for yourself, guys. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more content just like this, and until next time, stay nerdy, my friend.